Oh, hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're gonna be talking about 9 life lessons that I've learned this week. It's actually been an absolute bender of a week because I have recorded about 15 interviews for the Deep Dive podcast, and I thought I'd separate those things out into 3 lessons in terms of work, 3 lessons from the realm of health, and 3 lessons from the realm of relationships that I'm gonna share in this little video. Right, so the first life lesson is from someone called Francesca Spector, and it is the concept of alonement. Now, Francesca has written a book during the pandemic, which is all about how to spend time alone. And I interviewed her about this yesterday. And yesterday evening, I had this alonement time in my calendar. And the nice thing about this word that she's made up for this, alonement rather than loneliness, is that, you know, when you give a word, when you give a name to a thing, it makes you more intentional about the thing and makes you feel like the thing is more legit. And so yesterday evening in my calendar, I had a 4-hour block called Alonement, and I went to a restaurant by myself and did some journaling, and it was really nice. And I think one thing that I do struggle with, very much a first world problem, but something that I do struggle with is actually spending time by myself. Normally, if I have a free evening or something, I'll just sort of frantically message people to see who I can hang out with. But now having this vocabulary of alonement and hearing some of the benefits of spending time alone, the mental health benefits, the psychological benefits, etc., makes me more keen to try it out. The other cool thing about alonement and having it as a block in the calendar is that it then became a thing that I was looking forward to for the rest of the day. And essentially, anticipation is completely free points of happiness. Like, a lot of the value you get from a holiday is looking forward to the holiday. And if you look forward to something, it's just free happiness points. In case you're wondering, we're actually in the process of moving house, so today is a big day of packing. Anyway, lesson number 2 is in the health department, and this was from when I was interviewing Matteo and Alex, who are the co-founders of 8 Sleep, which is this $500 million sleep fitness company. And we were talking a lot about what's the 80-20 of what you need to know to really optimize your sleep. And one of the things, unsurprisingly, is sleeping and waking up at the same time every day, regardless of whether it's the weekend or not. And so they have this regimented thing where they're in bed by 10:30 and they wake at 6:30. And so I asked them that, like, hey, hang on, what's going on? That, like, isn't that like incompatible with a social life? What if you're out at dinner with friends? And what they said was, you know, if we're having dinner with friends, we'll do it at 6 p.m. or 6:30. And my mind was blown because it's such a simple thing. And in my mind, dinner with friends is like an 8 p.m. thing. And if you have dinner with friends at 8 p.m., by the time you order, it's 9. By the time you finish, it's like 11. By the time you get home, it's midnight. And then whenever that would happen, and I have dinner with friends many times a week, hashtag popular, but whenever that would happen, I would end up just missing out on sleep or waking up super late the next day, and then the whole day is a bit annoying. But I actually just could have dinner with friends, 6:30 p.m., and then we're done by like 8:39, so I can get home and be in bed for 10:30. So I just thought that little change in perspective, a dinner with friends does not have to be at 8 p.m. It can in fact be at 6:30. And speaking of sleep, I'm absolutely delighted to say that this video is very kindly sponsored by Emma. Now, Emma makes the absolute best mattresses in the world. I have been using an Emma mattress for about 3 years in my flat in Cambridge. And so when we reached out to them to say thank you, it was absolutely incredible that they offered to give us some free stuff for this house and to sponsor this video. Their products are absolutely fantastic. They've got a 10-year warranty on absolutely everything, along with free shipping and free returns, and a 200-night trial, so you can literally try out any of their products for 200 days, and if you don't like it, you can return it completely for free. And as we know, sleep is just a ridiculously important part of life, and later on in this video, we're going to talk about the idea of sleep fitness, which is another thing that I learned in this week of doing podcast interviews. This pillow as well that I use is an Emma pillow, and it's the most comfortable pillow I've ever used, and I also ordered one of their duvets, their king-size duvet that this blue thingies on. Microfiber, it's great, it's very comfortable. Anyway, if you fancy leveling up your sleep as well, you can head over to the Emma website, which will be linked down below. And if you use the coupon code ULIDREAM at checkout, you'll get an extra 5% off on top of all of the other promotions that they have. That's coupon code ULIDREAM, and thank you so much, Emma, for sponsoring this video and for helping me get a better night's sleep. Okay, so lesson number 3 that I'm taking away is something that I actually got from a bunch of different entrepreneurs. So Alex Hormozi, Daniel Priestley, Tim Armu, these guys, like, ridiculously successful entrepreneurs who have had exits in the tens of millions of dollars of range. And I asked a lot of them, you know, if you're interested in, for example, like, let's say you have a normal job and you're interested in starting a business one day because maybe you want to get rich or you want to have a certain type of impact, what would be the action that they recommend? And all 3 of them said, like, unanimously, that essentially taking some time to learn the skills of entrepreneurship and learn the skills of business is a very useful thing. If you currently have a normal job and you want to potentially start a business one day, then actually working for a small business or a startup for a year or two is a very, very good thing. The problem with having a corporate job is that you're a cog in a machine and you don't appreciate how the wider machine works. But, like for example, in the UK, there are like 5 million small businesses that have like less than 10 employees. And so if you join one of those businesses, almost whatever industry it's in, you'll get the whole range of experience and you'll understand how sales and marketing and operations and finance and legal and HR, you'll understand how all those things work. But anyway, that was lesson number 3, which is now how I'm going to respond to people when they ask me that question of like, what should I do if I want to start a business? Alrighty, so our next tip comes from my friend Cliff Weitzman, the founder and CEO of Speechify. And we spent about half of our conversation talking about business and speed listening, but the other half talking about being more intentional with relationships. And one thing that Cliff does, which is really great, is that he makes it a point that anytime he thinks something nice of someone, he will just like message them or voice note them the thing. And I just think that's a great rule to have in life. I often think about people and then I'm often like in the middle of something and then I just don't think to tell them that I'm thinking of them. Whereas what Cliff said is that, that is a worthwhile 10 seconds to take out of your day to just voice note someone, and it makes their day and it just adds great vibes to the world. Alrighty, so where are we? Item number 5 is a health-related thing, and that is what I got from speaking to Jim Doty, who's a professor of neurosurgery, and Tara Swart, who is a neuroscientist and psychiatrist. And we talked about the parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the sort of rest and recharge bit of the nervous system compared to the sympathetic nervous system, which is the sort of fight, flight, freeze kind of mode. And what Tara says is that according to some studies done in America, around 75% of US office workers are in this sort of sympathetic state of nervous system activation for most of their workday, which is quite a high stress, high anxiety type situation. But the way you can reset your nervous system is essentially by taking deep breaths. And that's why, this Apple Watch breathing thing where you just take a deep breath, deep breath in and out for a minute. That helps kind of reset your nervous system, to use colloquial phrases, and tends to activate the parasympathetic. And so you tend to feel less stressed by just doing that when you're at work. Alrighty, so here we are. We are in the new place. And I've sort of lost track of what lesson number we're on, but hopefully it'll appear over here. And this is another work-themed one, because we had 3 relationships, 3 health, 3 work. This is another work-themed one, and this is the idea of essentially leveling up your own ability to make money. Now again, we're speaking of the entrepreneurship stuff, and in the previous example, I talked about how these guys, it's quite echoey in here. Anyway, in the previous example, I talked about how these guys were all saying that if you want to learn how to do business, then join a startup for some amount of time. But there was something when I was speaking to Alex Hormozy as well, and I really liked the way he put it. He said that a lot of people make the mistake of trying to invest in the S&P when they should be investing in the SNME, lol. And so for example, if you have a spare $200 or something to invest when you've got a real job or you're a student or something like that, however much that money is, instead of trying to get 7% returns in the S&P 500, which is gonna, maybe when you're 65, then it'll compound to a reasonable level. Instead of doing that, what a lot of these guys are saying is that you should try your best to level up your own skills using that money. Like you can have a way higher return on that $200 if you invest it in training yourself, in maybe taking a course on sales or marketing or finance or operations or camera confidence or one of my courses if you want. But alternatively, in your industry, there might be some sort of certifications or courses or whatever that you can do, which will increase your floor of earning capability. And that generally pays way more dividends over the long term than investing in something like stocks and shares does. Now, we are somewhat fast forwarding a few days into the future because I didn't quite have time to film the rest of this video on the day because I went to a Hassan Minhaj comedy concert with my mum, but just want to round off the rest of this video with 3 more lessons. The first one comes from a chap called Daniel Priestley, who's written an amazing series of books that I absolutely love, The Entrepreneur Revolution and Oversubscribed, and he's got a new one called Scorecard Marketing. And what I learned from Daniel is a new method of creating a minimum viable product. Now, essentially the idea is that for anyone who has a business idea, you want to try and create an MVP, a minimum viable product, so that you can test your business idea without having to sink loads of time and money into it. And a mistake that people make is that they feel like if they have an idea for a business, they have to then quit their jobs to work on the idea, which is absolute BS. You don't need to do that at all. But what you can do is create a minimum viable product. And this is something that you can do on the side in the evenings or on the weekends. And crucially, there's 2 types of MVPs that you can do relatively easily. The first one is you can host some kind of Zoom webinar. Now, let's say you've got this idea for a service-based business, and let's say, I don't know, you're doing web design for private practice doctors or something like that, because that's an industry that you have some level of familiarity with. Now, it would be a total waste of time for you to go out and do all the things, make the websites, do the brochures, all that kind of stuff, because you don't know whether you're actually going to have any demand for your service. So essentially, you can do one of two things which are fairly easy. The first one is you can host a free webinar or a free event of some description, where you can be like, hey, this is an event where I'm going to teach you how a website can level up your private practice or level up your brand as a surgeon. And then you see how many people can you get to rock up to this totally free webinar or totally free event. And if you can get people to rock up to it, now that's your lead generation, which is sorted. And now you know that, okay, there's at least some demand for the product that I'm going to make. Alternatively, what you can do is create a scorecard of some sort. And that's what Daniel's new book, Scorecard Marketing, talks about, where you basically make a glorified quiz on Google Forms or on Score App or on any of these various different pieces of software. And it might be something like, hey, do you need a website to market your private practice as a surgeon? Take this quiz to find out. And you can construct the quiz in a way that gives you loads of really valuable data. And you can capture email addresses of people that do take the quiz. But crucially, your job is to then send traffic to that quiz somehow, using your network, using Facebook, using social media, using whatever. Because if you can't get people to fill out a free quiz, then your business is probably going to fail. And I think this method of kind of validating the idea for a service-based business is absolutely game-changing, because now it's accessible for absolutely anyone to test out a business idea, even while doing it on the weekend or while doing it in an evening. It only takes a couple of hours to set one of these things up. You don't need to know how to learn to code. You don't need to do any of that stuff. But every business stems from lead generation, and you have to be able to get leads for your business before you can do anything with them. Loads more about this in the episode that I'm going to release with Daniel Priestley in an upcoming season of my Deep Dive podcast. So if you haven't subscribed, you should check it out. It's available in all podcast players. And yeah, genuinely, this has changed the way that I think about business moving forward. All right, next we have another lesson about sleep. And this is one that I got from interviewing Alex and Matteo, who are the founders of 8 Sleep. And that's just the concept of sleep fitness. And I hadn't really come across this concept before that interview, but it's definitely something I've been thinking about since then. And it's the idea that just like you can have physical fitness and you can have a workout regime or a diet regime or something like that, there is also the concept of sleep fitness, that you can treat your sleep as something like fitness, something that you can optimize. And if, for example, you have a bad night's sleep, a few nights in a row, or you don't manage to sleep appropriately on time, or whatever the thing might be, then you can treat that similarly to how you might treat if you don't work out for a week or two, in that you can just get back on it. And I think when it comes to sleep, a mistake I've certainly made in the past is thinking, oh, my sleep schedule is really bad right now. Oh, there's no point in trying to fix it. Let me just sort of live with this and just not do anything about it. But if, for example, I missed a few workouts, I wouldn't just be thinking, oh, there's no point exercising ever again. I would actually be like, okay, that's fine. I've missed those 2 weeks. I can just begin again. And since coming across this idea of sleep fitness and listening to a few episodes of the Huberman Lab podcast where they talk much more about how to optimize your sleep, there's just a lot of things that I've been really actively thinking about to make sure that I get a decent night's sleep. And one of the things that Alex and Matteo said is that, sleeping appropriately is the absolute best performance enhancing drug that we know. And it just takes a few simple tweaks. For example, sleeping at the same time every day, ideally. Number 2, aiming to get roughly 8 hours-ish every evening. And number 3, aiming to sleep in a slightly colder temperature room, around about kind of 19 degrees Celsius seems to be a reasonable average, but your mileage may vary. And really what I'm trying to do moving forward is treat my sleep as this thing that's very important and this thing that I'm going to actively optimize because of just all of the various performance benefits and life benefits that you get from having a decent night's sleep. And final lesson is also in the relationships camp, and that is just the power of sending cold emails and cold DMs on social media apps like Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn, for example. And again, this is a tip that I got from Cliff, and he talked about in the podcast interview about how many friends he's made and how many contacts he's made purely by virtue of sending the appropriate cold email or cold message. That's how he ended up hanging out with Mr. Beast. It's how he ended up meeting a bunch of his heroes. It's how he ended up meeting people who he then hired as part of his team. It's how he ended up meeting his current girlfriend. And I think when it comes to sending cold DMs and cold messages, I always have this bit of hesitation around it that, what do I have to offer? Like, why would they reply, etc., etc. But anytime I've sent a cold email, I've always been glad that I've sent the cold email. And it's a very positive expected value thing. Like worst case scenario, they're not going to reply. Best case scenario, they do reply and you end up developing a relationship with this person that you've admired. So that's certainly something that I'm taking forward, and I'm trying to become more okay with sending cold DMs when I vibe with someone, just to be like, hey, do you want to hop on a call? Or, hey, I happen to be in your area in the near future. Do you want to grab dinner or something? Anyway, that brings us to the end of this somewhat rambly 9 lessons that I learned in this week of recording about 15 different podcast interviews. If you like this, you might like to check out this video over here, which is 27 life lessons from 27 years on this earth. in about 27 minutes. So if you like these sorts of listicles, you might like to check that out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.